Hi, all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and today I'm going to bring you a case from California. So let's just jump right into it, shall we? Herbert, or Herb Mullin, was born on April 18th, 1947, in Salinas, California, to parents Martin and Jean Mullin. He was the youngest of two, with an older sister. According to all the sources I could find, his mother was a devout Catholic, while his father was more of the agnostic type. Martin was a World War II veteran and a strong disciplinarian, though there are no reports of abuse. Martin taught Herb how to shoot guns and box, while Jean was so strict in her beliefs that she really believed the world was just this terrible, dangerous place and taught her children all of her beliefs. She even homeschooled them for a while before they uprooted and moved to San Francisco, a larger town, when Herb was about 5. Martin worked at this time as a furniture salesman, and Herb started public school, where it was quickly determined he had above average intelligence. Still, he fit in well with his peers and made friends fairly easily at this time. And as time went on, however, Herb started down the road of weird and inappropriate thoughts and conclusions. This is based on what he says overhearing snippets of conversations about sex from older and more liberalized children. So, after hearing these conversations, he started to believe that because his father didn't masturbate or perform oral sex on this now 6-year-old Herb, he clearly didn't love him. Still, he was too afraid to voice his concerns to his father, and so Martin really never explained the difference in sex and its appropriateness in different situations. Still, these odd ideas that he was forming didn't seem to affect Herb's schooling, and he continued to do well. His mother, however, didn't like the big city and how it was influencing both children, reportedly just being overall unhappy with her situation. And so when Herb was in middle school, the family moved again, this time to Felton, which was a slightly smaller city. And as a result of this, Jane was appeased and Martin got a new job. Felton was a smaller community again, but Herb managed to fit in well with his peers. He was athletic, popular, and academically pretty much at the top of his class. He found girlfriends easily as a result of all of this. He graduated in 1965, where he was voted, quote, most likely to succeed, end quote. Quote, he was normal looking, and his underlying disturbances were masked, end quote. Luis, a psychology professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, told A&E. He planned on going to college with his closest friend at the time, Dean Richardson, where Herb would study to be an engineer, but that summer, Dean was in a motorcycle accident, resulting in his death. Herb took this hard. He converted his room basically into a shrine for the boy, and he mourned him for so long that his girlfriend at the time told him that it seemed like he was obsessing over Dean and Dean's death. The pair promptly split up because Herb believed that he was in love with Dean. That had to be the only reason he was acting the way he was, that he must be homosexual. And he also, at this time, began reaching out to other religions, where he started obsessing over the idea of reincarnation specifically, even wanting to study these new ideas abroad. His family wasn't too keen on this, though, and their counteroffer at the time was for him to join the military. But Herb had begun smoking weed and using LSD at this point, and he was not interested at all in the military. Additionally, this is about the time that his drug use led to a mental health decline, and years later, he'd be diagnosed with schizophrenia. He began hearing voices, and he started asking his sister to have sex with him. At first, she kind of shirked him off, but his requests became more frequent and extreme, driving her out of the family home and into her boyfriend, who promptly turned husband's, home. In February of 1969, his sister brought over her new husband for a family dinner. After meeting the man, Herb began to mimic his mannerisms and actions to the point that it was pretty awkward all night per the family. And after that night, Jean called the family doctor because she was really worried about his actions. And the family doctor suggested that Herb should be committed to a mental institution for evaluation and a medication regimen. As he was not a danger to himself or others, however, it had to be voluntary, a task that took his mother weeks to get him to agree to. And finally, the 22-year-old Herb entered the California's Mendocino State Hospital. Once at the facility, it was clear that Herb was mentally ill, but he was so smart that he quickly learned how to answer the questions proposed to him in order to mask or look sane. And for 6 weeks, they went back and forth where they attempted to diagnose him. Still, for 6 weeks, Herb answered questions the way he knew they should be. This led to a release without an actual diagnosis or any medication be given to him. Herb was brought home, and Herb decided that he needed to be a human sacrifice. Clearly, his mental health was not any better. Beginning to believe that Mother Earth demanded sacrifice, or the world was going to be ended. He wrote his thoughts down and sent them out to mail to strangers, but he did it so frequently that some of these people began calling the police. Herb had written his address, and as such, police obviously knocked on his door in June of 1970 to check on him, make sure he was alive, and to inform him that he really needed to stop sending these letters and rhetoric to people. But the family was out. They were on vacation in Hawaii. And so the police sent the information off to Hawaii, who in turn went and found the family. And by the time the Mullins were located in Hawaii, Herb was in a psychotic state. This resulted in his second hospitalization in a state mental facility, this time in Hawaii. However, the family's vacation ended, and his mother and father had to return home, leaving Herb behind for weeks. Once again, the result of hospitalization was the same: mind games and release without a diagnosis or medication. His mother collected him from the airport in California and brought him home. He said nothing to the family, and once they were asleep, he took off. He landed in several new places, and in each new place attempted a new identity. His longest lasting stint was with a group of hippies, the idealistic people who were often heavy into drug use at the time. And there, Herb's rantings didn't seem so insane, to start at least, and the drug used fueled his thoughts and convinced others he was one of them. He couch surfed, saying long enough at spots to have others really kind of start to notice that he didn't contribute before moving on. But as the climate and ideas of the culture shifted, Herb's did not, and he started to disalign with the group, eventually claiming to hate them all outright. As a result, at the time, he did the only thing he could think of. Herb went home. At home, life was quiet. That was until Herb started to believe that he now had these new powers of telepathy, that his parents, specifically his father, would send him messages that only he could hear, through thought, of course. Herb believed that his father was proud of him for rising above the average person, for being able to hear other people's thoughts. That telepathy was his heightened state of being. But instead of Herb being a martyr, as he had used in his original letters, he needed to find those subjects that were ready to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, that these sacrifices were needed to keep Mother Nature at bay. Those people would also be reincarnated to a better and more awakened life. And so it really wasn't such a bad thing for him to conduct these sacrifices. For weeks and months, he listened to the toilings of him and his parents speaking telepathically. And then one afternoon, it was time. On October 13th, 1972, Herb took a drive, following a signal he believed was guiding him. He passed a homeless man that he telepathically heard call to him to be a sacrifice. There he met 55-year-old Lawrence Whitey White walking down the road. When Whitey noticed Herb's car pull over, he asked if Herb was having car trouble, to which, of course, the man said yes. And Whitey leaned over, checking the engine, trying to help out another human being. That's when Herb went to the trunk, pulled out a baseball bat, and rounded on Whitey. He swung and connected once, fracturing the man's skull and killing him. From there, Herb drug him to the wood line. And after that, he simply went home. Whitey was spotted the next day, but no investigation was completed into his death at the time. 2 weeks later, Herb was back on the prowl. On October 24th, he picked up hitchhiker Mary Margaret Guilfoyle, college student who was late to an appointment. Herb offered her a ride and she swiftly got in, but shortly down the road, he slipped out a knife and simply stabbed her in the chest with no words. He drove to the woods and got to work. He sliced Mary open, trying to find out what people were doing to the earth. He believed that people were polluted and he was trying to find out where it came from. He didn't stop until she was eviscerated. All of her organs had been removed, and he even cut into her legs to see if there was anything in the flesh or meat. Once complete, he made no attempt to cover her up. He simply got up, went home, and showered. After this killing, he was lucid for a while, and with lucidity, of course, his conscience came into play. For the first time in his life, he leaned into his mother for help. Though he didn't tell her of the specific things that were going on in his head, he did say that he was having some troubles. Naturally, she told him, "Go to church, confess your sins." So, on November 2nd, he went to confess his sins as his mother had told him. He went to a church in Los Gatos where Father Henry Tomei was there to listen to his confessions. But in the confessional, as he started talking, Herb's mind broke again, and he heard the father telepathically speaking to him, though he was also speaking out loud. Herb opened up the priest's side of the confessional and beat the man as he pulled him out of the booth, then switched to his knife, stabbing Father Henry until he stopped moving. Once the victim was ended, Herb went home, but this time, in his psychotic state, he felt at peace at what he was doing. Oddly then, in January of 1973, Herb decided to join the military and he put in his application to join the U.S. Marine Corps. He stopped using drugs and started working out and eating healthy. Mentally, he wasn't much better, but his mask was. And he had begun to believe that participating in the Vietnam War would allow him to sacrifice more people faster and keep Mother Nature appeased while making sure to stay out of trouble with the law. But that ended promptly when the Marine Corps asked for a copy of his criminal record. Apparently, thought that signing that would also allow them to see his 2 stints within mental facilities, which isn't really true. And in any case, because he wouldn't sign off on that, that ended his potential military career. This made him think of what brought about his issues, and Herbs really started to think about where it all began, and he went to marijuana use, which he started in high school. From there, he needed someone to blame, and the person he chose was the first person to offer him the drug, Jim Gianeri, an old friend. Herb hunted him down, going first to look at his old house that they lived in high school, but instead he found another old friend, Kathy Francis, who had purchased the home from the family. Since they were all old friends, Kathy told Herb of Jim's current whereabouts, and Jim immediately thanked her and then went to the cabin he was directed to, where Jim, along with wife Joan, answered the door. Herb quickly went from cordial to ranting, and then pulled a gun. Jim ran, and Herb shot him in the back. Jim pushed Joan through a door and screamed at her to lock it. There, standing in front of the door, Herb shot Jim twice more, killing him. He then forced himself into the bathroom where Joan was hiding and shot her in the face 3 times, after which he pulled out a knife and stabbed the pair a multitude of times. Leaving the cabin, he returned to Kathy's home, knocking once again, and this time when Kathy answered, she was met with Herb's pistol. He shot her in the face and then stepped into the home. In the home, he found Kathy's 2 sons playing in another room. He shot the 4-year-old twice in the face, followed by the 9-year-old, and once again he pulled out his knife and stabbed everyone he had just killed. And this is where insanity versus sanity will later come into play, that he knew he needed to cover up the bodies and that Kathy was a potential witness who would have stopped him, proving later that he knows right from wrong. And once again, after these attacks, he simply went home. All of those killed were found later that day, and police ended up attributing originally to a gang-related issue owing to Jim's known affiliations with drugs and those affiliated with drug use. Between January and February of 1973, Mary's body was also discovered, but police had a hard time determining who might be responsible for this. And I will say, on an offshoot, this is the time that we had another active serial killer in the area, Ed Kemper. On February 10th, Herb went into the woods. He was hoping for some solace, but there he stumbled upon a group of 4 teenage boys camping out. Disgusted that their sight was filthy, he stalked them. He reports that originally he went back there during the day and told the boys to clean up, and they mocked him for it. And so, in the dead of night, he walked up to their tent, unzipped it, and killed all 4 boys. From the site, he grabbed $20 and their rifle, and then once again, simply went home. On February 13th, he was driving around and collecting firewood when he believed he was told he needed a new sacrifice. Driving into Santa Cruz, he spotted 72-year-old Fred Perez working in his garden. Herb did a U-turn, stopped, and got out. He pulled out his new rifle that he acquired from the boys, leveled it over his hood, and shot Fred in the chest, striking his heart and killing him instantly. Then, put the rifle on safety, put it in his trunk, and simply took off. This time, however, he didn't notice that there was a witness, thankfully. Another neighbor had been out gardening that day and saw this car drive by, do a U-turn, and saw the whole thing. Saw the man get out, level his rifle, and shoot Fred. They, of course, took down the license plate and immediately called the police. Within minutes, patrol cars were notified and Herb was found. He was arrested without resistance, even leaving his .22 pistol sitting on the passenger seat right next to him at the time of arrest. According to police, Herb talked all the way to the station. Then he spoke for hours in the interrogation room. Herb spoke about his ideas and why he had to kill, that he was being sent these telepathic signals. He told them of the teenagers in the woods, which at the time had not been discovered until his confession, as he did give the exact location of their murders. Eventually, police registered that this man was not sane and he needed counsel. And he really wasn't going to ask for it, perhaps again due to his mental state. They were the ones that called defense attorney James Jackson for him. Police searched the car and found knives, guns, and a note that read, quote, "Let it be known to the nations of earth and the people that inhabit it, this document carries more power than any other written before. Such a tragedy as what has happened, and because of this action, which I take of my own free will, I am making it possible to occur again. For while I can be here, I must guide and protect my dynasty." End quote. The defense attorney went to the family and asked which psychiatrist was treating Herb after meeting him and hearing his rantings and everything that had to go along with them, only to find out that he wasn't receiving any treatment. Apparently, this came as quite a shock and concern, and so doctors were brought in from both sides, and he was officially diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Dr. David Marlowe became the lead and put together a comprehensive assessment and noted which delusions shaped him the most. On July 30th, 1973, the trial for 10 murders was ready, leaving out Father Henry's case due to interference of his sanity, as it was believed that he was in the middle of a psychotic break when he murdered the father. On the first day of trial, Herb entered the court solo, announcing he was going to represent himself. He said that he would not have a hippie representing him because of the lawyer's hair, which, to be noted, according to sources, was just slightly below the collar, and his counsel even said that he would go out, get his hair cut, and come back if it would appease his client. But after back and forth, he was required counsel. Then his sanity came into question on whether or not he was competent to stand trial. Through his own admissions and the assessment of Dr. Marlowe, he was suffering from a mental health disorder, but he also remained capable of understanding right from wrong, as evidenced in the murder of Jim and Kathy. Therefore, he was considered competent to stand trial. Each murder was argued between first and second-degree murder, as he had already confessed to police and psychiatrist, and so the question of him doing it wasn't part of the trial. In the end, the jury deliberated for just 14 hours, which, again, we're talking about double-digit murders here, and really, that's not that long because they're deciding between first and second for each person. And again, they had to decide individually how each murder would be considered. On August 19th, 1973, Herb Mullin was found guilty of 8 murders in the second degree, and the murders of Jim and Kathy were, of course, in the first degree. Guilty on all counts. Herb was only 26 at the time of sentencing, which was 2 concurrent life sentences with the possibility parole. Then, on December 11th, Father Henry's trial was set, and while originally Herb pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, prior to the start of trial, he thankfully changed it to second-degree murder. On December 21st, 1973, he was then sentenced to a consecutive 5 years to life term for second-degree murder of the father. Herb was sent to Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. He was housed in the same area as Ed Kemper. In fact, the prison guards thought it was funny and gave them adjoining cells. The two disliked each other for various reasons, but Ed knew about mental illness. It ran in his family. And so while other inmates were too afraid to stop the rantings and the singing of the lunatic Herb, Ed would spray him with water. If Herb asked permission to sing, he was given a peanut. Later, Ed said about Herb that he would do anything for a reward. Quote, Herbie loved his peanuts. End quote. As soon as parole was eligible, he began applying, and that was in 1980. By 2008, however, he still wasn't taking any amount of responsibility for his actions, saying that he was led astray by others, even mentioning that he was a gullible and immature schizophrenic. In July of 2014, he wrote about having a positive attitude and for the first time accepted responsibility for his crimes, that he was even sorrowful that he had committed them. Still, he was denied over 8 times. And then, on August 18, 2022, Herb died at 7:35 p.m. at 75 years old. He had been transferred to the California Healthcare Facility due to his declining health and died of natural causes, according to the San Quentin County Office of Medical Examiners. And that is the strange case of Herb Mullin. To all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.